Hi everybody and welcome to this week's edition of Straight Talk with Bren O'Brien and Tim Rowe from The Straight, brought to you by Darley and Inglis. Today we are joined by interim ATC CEO Steve McMahon for a special interview. The McGrath review set to be released in Queensland. What does a race club look like when it's not actually running races? And what can Australia learn from Great Britain? In Breeding and Bloodstock, Trilogy gets a Group 1 reward. Australian buyers involved at Tatts. The breeders call for politics to be put second in the patent debate. And in wagering, is the Tote on the way back? And the virtue or otherwise of same race/same game multis. First of all, Tim, thanks for joining us. And a rarity for Straight Talk. We're just going to go straight to our feature interview today. Interim Chief Executive Officer of the Australian Turf Club, Steve McMahon, joins us to chat over what is a very interesting time in both the history and the future of the ATC. Steve, thanks for talking to us.
Happy to be here.
I mean, it's been a dramatic couple of years at the ATC, fair to say that. Talk us through more recently, I guess, what the current situation is with a show cause notice from Racing New South Wales. Obviously, there was a key meeting last week.
It's been a pretty quiet year, really, in racing in general terms for us. A pretty quiet time. But no, look, in all seriousness, our board met with Racing New South Wales just over a week ago. We've submitted our show cause response. We're confident that we're sound financially and our governance is sound. So we've made those representations. They've come back asking for more information, which we will be providing. And yeah, we're hopeful that we can work through this before Christmas, ideally, but we'll see how we go.
What was the tone of that meeting like, Steve? There's a lot of outside noise, I guess, but around the table, what was it like?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously all confidential, so we can't go into too much detail, but it was actually pretty good. There was a free-flowing discussion between ourselves and Racing New South Wales and their board members. So no, it was pretty happy with that. It went pretty well in that regard.
You've obviously got a key insight into the financial strength or otherwise the ATC, Steve. You've been there a long time. You sort of know how it works. Obviously, you're in the interim CEO role now. How confident are you that the fundamentals are there for the club to rebound from, I guess, this difficult period and sort of shoot forward?
Yeah, look, no, I'm very confident that we can. I mean, look, if you looked at it, if we were a ASX listed company, would we be in receivership? The answer is no. We can pay our bills and we've got a strong asset base. Would our share price be low? Probably. But there's certainly room for improvement there. I think for the ATC, back with the old AJC days, even the STC days, if you really have a look at those books, all of those models were under pressure. They were all struggling. Both sides had levels of debt, and a lot of that goes missing from the history of all that. So it's always been an issue. When you've got 4 large race courses to maintain and the impact on training, we want to make sure that we've got the best tracks and all of those surfaces, the stables. The maintenance bill is massive. And yes, you do get revenues through wagering, but as you know, the wagering model is changing. TAB returns are going down, more reliant on other forms of gambling. Plus there's taxes and there's also further regulation from governments. And so there's an issue with all that. So yes, we need to adapt to the future. You can't just keep doing the things that you've done in the past and expect for everything to be rosy. So that's why we need to look at alternative revenue sources that don't just rely on wagering, while still not ignoring wagering, because it is far and away our biggest component. So look, no, I am confident. We've got some great properties. We've got some great assets that we can leverage that don't impact on actual racing. A lot of surplus land that we can work through, and that's part of the strategy. But we've also got things like we've got approval now from the state government for festivals and concerts that are off the track using our spectator facilities and the Theatre of the Horse and the wing stand at Randwick, for example. And we can also do that already at Rosehill. So there's a lot of opportunity. And I feel that sometimes in the past, a lot of our assets that we don't use for racing go unused most of the time.
Steve, you've worked in racing and race clubs for administration for a long time. How much of this story is just about the ATC specifically and race clubs more generally across the state and Australasia, really, of the challenges facing race clubs and moving forward? And you sort of touched on it there just a bit just then.
Yeah, I mean, you've lost racing in Macau and Singapore and places like that. So there is certainly pressure. Yeah, look, I started back in business banking and that was boring. So then I ended up working in government for a chief of staff for the racing minister. So I got to see that side of the argument where we had race clubs and participant groups coming all the time, talking about their needs for funding. Then I became CEO of the Trainers Association. So I learned from that side and the struggles that trainers have running that business for 5 years, and then ended up at the ATC. So nearly here 10 years now. So being able to see all sides of the fence, I suppose, from that perspective. And look, you just need to adapt. The people who adapt and the people who innovate are the ones who succeed and survive. If we just keep doing what we've done for years and years go by, and the romanticism of all of that, it might sound good, it might look good on a tweet late at night, but in reality, we need to change the way we do things.
Yeah, and it is an interesting one. I guess you look at the specific opportunities of the ATC, but if you look around Australia, you've got obviously the VRC's had some challenges in Melbourne, but are looking to address that. Yeah, we've got the MRC who have built alternative business models, I suppose. We've got a story up the straight this morning about Moonee Valley and what they're doing without racing there. You've got the Brisbane Racing Club and their developments there and what's going on. I mean, those opportunities, I mean, how do you see them, Steve? What are the sort of key 2 to 3 things that sort of sit there and go, all right, these are the things we need to act on in order to make sure that the ATC can build and thrive over the next sort of 10 years?
Obviously, there's the funding model discussion, but it's also with our own devices, we need to make our assets work for us in a sustainable way into the future. Now, that sounds like a motherhood statement, but let me put some real life to it. If we to develop the Camellia project, which is kind of like Rosehill 2.0, it's just the car parks and the surplus land there, and similarly at Canterbury on the surplus land, and even any of our racecourses for that matter, but these are the ones that are live, that we need to turn those. You can't just flog them off for money and then put in the bank. I mean, you can live off the interest, but you need to make them work. So, for example, at Camellia, the idea has always been to pick up the bowling club, move it across the road into a multi-use development where you've got potentially a hotel, a mixed use. You can view the racecourse. It becomes a 365-day experience for the community out there. That brings you ongoing revenue. So, yes, you might sell some parts of it to pay off debts and to infrastructure, much needed stable infrastructure and the like that we have. But you also need to have an ongoing revenue stream because you can only sell the farm once, and once it's gone, it's gone. So you need that revenue stream moving forward. So they're some of the things that we're looking at right now.
So it's 6 months, so it's 2 years since the Rosehill proposal was first certainly went public.
Yeah.
How do you reflect on that, to be honest, tumultuous period, I guess, possibly for yourself and industry more generally?
Oh, look, you learn a lot from these things. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Look, if we could you do it differently, obviously. I think the way it started, the benefit of hindsight, the way it's communicated, the way it's delivered, you definitely do it differently. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But look, was it worth it? Look, $5 billion doesn't come around every day. It was certainly worth exploring. It'll never happen again. So you can't say no to $5 billion, at least exploring it. So yes, we definitely would have done things differently, but now we move on. We move on now, and we've still got the Camellia plan, and we've got surplus land at Canterbury. So we've got enough options that if we can get through the next couple of years, some of those projects will then land, and then that'll put us in a pretty strong position to move forward for the next 50 years.
Just to put a bow on the sort of Rosehill fallout, I suppose, Steve, or the Rosehill proposal. I mean, were you surprised by how divisive and personal it became, and that it became a real sort of lightning rod for a lot of other issues in the broader racing industry?
No, it was funny when it was first being discussed internally. It was pretty obvious. We knew that obviously with tradition, and we knew that members it was going to be confronting. It was a pretty big deal, obviously. But we were talking about the kind of money that was life-changing for racing in Sydney for the ATC. It would set us up for 100 years and beyond. And there's so many threats into the future with governments and greenies and the like. So we were aware of all that. So no, not really. And I think even our chairman at the time said it reminded him of the gun laws debate where you lose lifelong friends. And I think, unfortunately, that did happen, and that's sad. But it just goes to show there's a lot of passion in racing, and you take the good with the bad with that kind of stuff. But again, I just think it was an opportunity worth exploring, regardless of which side of the debate you're on. Like I've always said, if someone offered you 5 times the amount of money for your house, what would you do? I mean, I love my house. I'm sure everyone loves their home, but you'd have to think about it. So it is what it is now. We move on.
On some of those developments around Rosehill, as you just sort of discussed, how do you move on, or how do you execute that now in the next month or few months, years to, monetize those, I guess? Yeah.
So with the Camellia plan, so there was an old Camellia plan pre-Rosehill that the former government had done. We felt that was inadequate. It wasn't actually, so the calls from the opposition to just dust it off and bring it back are false. sorry, they're not false. They're just flawed, I should say. We didn't believe they would optimize the land for us, and neither did neighbouring landowners. So it's being amended. The current government, our understanding is looking at what that could look like into the future. Our land's okay, but the land around us is quite contaminated. So they're looking at how that works. There's a number of long-term leases around that. So we're in the best position because of our car park land and the surplus land around there. We're basically ready to go when we get some approval. So the way it would work in terms of being monetized, we would expect within the next 6 months, the government will come out with some form of strategy for that. And then following with the rezoning, once we know what those rezonings are, we can then enter into discussions with obviously Racing New South Wales, but also our partners and developers to monetize that, whether it's money up front or whether you take it at the end. We've got to look at that deal. But I'd say within the next 12 months, we're in a position to actually have those discussions. So like I said before, we're looking at it's like a 2-year bridge, 2 to 3 year bridge we need to get through where we're at, which I'm confident we will. And then that's when it really starts to see the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
You alluded to Canterbury before. I mean, obviously there's been plans around there and there's been discussion about redevelopment of that land for some time and I guess maximising the value of it. Where's that at, Steve? And I mean, it sounds like with the Rosehill situation, that's probably like it's got to go through a political process. Is it similar with Canterbury, or do you feel like you can act on that quicker?
Oh, look, with Canterbury, so we're just talking about the surplus land here, not the whole racecourse. The whole racecourse is another discussion for another day. And if that ever happened, we'd be bringing members on the journey well and truly early on in the piece. So we don't want to learn the lessons from Rosehill if we ever go down that. But that's not for now. We've got 3 parcels of surplus land outside the racecourse. One of them's got the quarantine centre on it, so we've obviously got to be careful there, or we'd have to find an alternative for that. But we've got the King Street development that we're working through now. Got a few legal issues with our partner on that we're trying to sort through, but it's valuable land. And again, within the next couple of years, that will be realised in terms of development, which will give us the cash we need. So that parcel of land's pretty much ready to go. It's whether or not we look at the other car park lands and do something on those to try to get that happening. And they're non-core land, so it's a member's vote for non-core land. But if you ever did anything at the racecourse, that is core land, and you definitely need member support.
A quick follow-up on that. I mean, how important you talk about, I mean, I'm not obviously specifically in the legal with the partners, I'm not sort of interested in getting into that, but how important is it to you get the right partner for this development, Steve, and that you actually get the right people on board and to know, because, the cost for you guys, if you don't get that right, is another 5 years of sort of mucking around and trying to make things happen, isn't it? So
100%. And look, these are neighbouring developments to our racecourse. So we want to make sure they're a quality and that they complement the experience when you go to the track and don't detract from it. So we're not about selling just to the highest bidder and getting the biggest chunk of cash we can and moving on. You've got to be strategic about it. And we want to build communities around there. A lot of discussions, for example, at Canterbury and King Street is like the need for, cafes and restaurants and making it a live experience so that if we ever do anything, if we ever invest more capital into whether it's Rosehill or Canterbury, you want it to be a community. You want it to be something that invites people to the track. If you look at our racetracks around the world, but particularly ours, looking at it Randwick now, they're fenced off from the community, and that's for security and safety and horse welfare and but they're not. We don't welcome people in there. So if we can create an environment around the developments and around the entry points to our race courses that make it a place to go, well then they'll go have a coffee and then they might go to the track or visit. If you've got a gym there or whatever you've got, they'll make it a 365-day visitor experience, not just going to the track on a Saturday or a Wednesday or a Friday night.
Yep.
Under the Rosehill sale proposal, Warwick Farm was slated for a major infrastructure upgrade. I guess was probably going to be one of the biggest winners, and that track's, to my knowledge, there's been projects suggested for a number of years. Where's that? And I guess in a part of a bigger picture, ATC infrastructure projects particularly for training, which is such an important part of Sydney.
Yeah. I love Warwick Farm. It's the closest one to my house. It's a good part of the world. I was out there earlier this week talking to the trainers and that as well. And look, the reality is we don't have the money to do what we were proposing to do as part of the Rosehill sale. The development there is limited because of the flooding, so you can't really do a residential type development there. So that's why it was going to cost so much, because you could build the stables there, but you'd have to spend a lot on engineering and the like to make it happen. So we've just fixed the jockey rooms out there. I am looking at a few things that we can do to improve the member and spectator experience there on track. The track there does need to be rebuilt. It's fine the way it is, but that's not true. It's serviceable the way it is, but there's a camber at the side that falls off, which is not ideal, which makes it hard when you get a bad barrier and the like. It needs a revamp, so it does need new surfacing, and that's something that we'll work with Racing New South Wales to do. That we nearly had that online a couple of years ago, and then things were paused. So we've got a good relationship with the council there in terms of the DA. So the track is a priority of something we need to do. And then in the future, with stables and the like, we're looking at innovative ways to have funding for stables and the like, whether or not the trainers themselves invest, because at the moment it's a rent deal for everything. So, like the Packer model or other types of arrangements. So we're really looking at innovative ways that we can do it. But yeah, the Warwick Farm will continue to be our strongest training centre, and we just need to improve the facilities there. The tracks you've got there are pretty good. The training facilities are pretty good, the tracks. It's just the course proper. We definitely need to do some work on there.
Well, what's the relationship like with the trainers, between the ATC and the trainers at the moment, Steve? There was obviously a little bit of tension earlier this year about costs and all that sort of stuff. And trainers have always got, and so well from your previous role, trainers have always got concerns around rising costs and how things work. I mean, have you worked hard to sort of make sure that relationship's strong? Because it's a really key stakeholder group, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, my former job at the Trainers Association obviously helps me with that and those relationships. But no, look, I think it's pretty strong. We're trying to do it a different way. We're actually going to go and talk to them early on in the piece and consult with people. There's always going to be an issue that we're going to quibble over, whether it's fees or the like, and facilities. So there's always that. But like even the meeting we had at Warwick Farm the other day, a few things were raised, and with Nivesh Ramdani there, we're able to solve those things like extra trials and things. So there are always solutions to these problems. So no, we're definitely keen to work with them and treat them as partners, because they do a great job in promoting the carnival. Horses can't talk, so it's only our jockeys and our trainers and our vibrant owners that can talk. So they do a great job promoting it. So we want to work with them because we're all in the same boat at the end of the day. We'll be transparent with our finances so they're aware of what we're doing and why, and we'll try to improve the facilities the best we can. Like a lot of our stables are old, so we do need to do some improvements there. So yeah, we'll work with them. So yeah, in answer to your question, I think they're pretty good most of the time.
So just on following up on that, Steve, the ATC is still paused, I guess, the rent increases for stabling and the costs of trials as well, which obviously owners feel as well.
Good question. I'm actually just having discussions in the coming days or weeks just to try to resolve that. So it won't be as onerous as before, but we obviously need to do something. So stay tuned on that one. It's all part of our response and our financial situation at the moment. We just want to bundle it all together. So yeah, you'll have something about that soon.
On the track, and Bren and I were both at Randwick on Everest Day in different parts of the track, and we had speaking for myself, had a great day. The appetite there from Sydney to embrace racing, obviously was sold out at Everest Day, but out beyond that, it features part of a leisure activity and just obviously aside from punting as well.
Yeah, look, I think what Everest Day showed, Everest creates a halo effect, and we're now seeing uplift on our other days, because once Everest is sold out, then it benefits the other days. It definitely attracts a younger crowd, a more female crowd, a new generation of punters. Now, what we're noticing is that our big days are getting bigger, but our small days are getting smaller. And the challenge then is to turn those once a yearers into more often. They don't have to come every day of the week. They don't have to come every day of the week. They just need to come twice or three times, and automatically it bumps it up. But it's not just about those days. It's about the future of racing. I mean, when I've got my 16-year-old daughter who's telling me that her friends are trying to get tickets, so make sure you bring a guardian. But no, when I've got my 16-year-old daughter saying things like that, then that's pleasing, because I'm always worried about, they say that the younger generation are a bit more left-leaning or green. We don't want to lose that generation. We do face societal threats through regulation, animal welfare, and gambling and the like. So we need those new fans coming through. And I don't care if they're coming just to go to a party or go to the after party, or they're coming because they're friends. We need to broaden our audience. And yeah, we need to introduce them to horse racing and wagering, but we need all parties welcome so that we have a strong coalition to support racing in the future.
When I was growing up and going to the track, Steve, and I think the bookmaker's ring always was enthralling to me or captivating. Is that, obviously it's probably a bit of a dying art, unfortunately, but trying to work with the on-course bookies in Sydney to create a good experience, and hopefully those punters that do go use their services.
Yeah, definitely. We're trying to look at a few things we can do to improve the on-course betting experience, wagering experience. The bookies ring on Everest Day felt like the old days. I say that as a 48-year-old, but it did feel pretty good, and it was a good vibe in there. And look, a lot of it's about educating punters, particularly the new ones, about how it works. They feel a bit intimidated going to see the bookies sometimes when they can do it all on their phone and they don't have to go and talk to a human. It's something different. You actually get a better price on the on-course bookies, but we're not allowed to promote that because of gambling laws. So we've got to find a creative way to get that message out there that you actually do get a better price on track. So it is a challenge, but it is a unique part of going to a racetrack, and I think a pretty cool part that most people enjoy.
Yeah, and I think the theatre of the track is obviously always a great selling point, and bookmakers have always been part of that. Steve, appreciate it's a very busy time. You sound like you got plenty on your plate to work through, but we really appreciate you taking the time to have a chat with us here on Straight Talk. All the best for the coming time, and yeah, we'll look forward to catching up with you along the journey.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Cheers.
The following segment is brought to you by Darley. It's been another big spring for the Darley Stallions, with their progeny delivering right across the carnival. In total, 38 stakes races were won, everything from those sharp early 2-year-olds through the major Group 1s. And while the Godolphin racing team certainly played their part, it was the client-bred horses who really filled the sheet. They accounted for 26 of those 38 stakes wins. 4 Darley Stallions produced Group 1 winners this spring, spanning the whole range from 1,200 metres to 2,500 metres. Street Boss, Too Darn Hot, Harry Angel and Gayath all had multiple stakes winners across the carnival. Too Darn Hot's pre-Christmas 2-year-olds were flying again, taking out both the Jim Crack and the Darley Maribon on plate. And Bivouac notched his first Group 1 winner, Baywat, who broke the track record in the Golden Rose with a rating of 108. Bred well, buy well, win well. Darley. Rightio, Tim. McGrath review is set to be released in Queensland on Saturday. Long-awaited McGrath review. I guess it's fair to say long-awaited. It was due to be released, I think, on October 13, and it'll get released nearly December. The Queensland racing industry has been waiting on this one for a while. There's obviously been a degree of, I'd say trepidation, but certainly anticipation about what this may look like, particularly around the funding model. So I think there'll be more to come out of this over the next few days. There's suggestion that the government may not revise the point of consumption tax. One of the initial proposals was rumoured to be that they were going to reduce it from 20 to 15%. But in a racing environment as dynamic as Queensland, and Queensland has its own particular challenges, Tim, because its geographical spread, the amount of tracks they have, and the fact it's tri-code as well. The future, I guess, operational capacity and strategic capacity of racing Queensland will probably be defined by what we hear on Saturday from Tim Mander at Doomben.
Yeah, look, I don't want to preempt what, because I haven't seen the report. Certainly don't know. I know, as you sort of alluded to, I think it's been across the desk of, say, Racing Queensland and a few other people for up to probably 8 weeks. And I think there'll be some positive low-hanging fruit, for want of a better term, as it described to me. But it's the bigger picture issues, I guess, around POC and the funding and the sustainability of, let's talk thoroughbreds, the number of tracks in Queensland and the country tracks, which, I'm an advocate for, as I've said multiple times, advocate for country racing and the importance of those once-a-year meetings, but the financial sustainability of all those, and trying to, it's a fine balance for the regulators and PRAs to get that right.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of sort of things to play out with this in the politics way. I guess what was kind of interesting to me is that a few people were surprised that this announcement or this event was made. Was I guess planned on Saturday morning. There's a couple of things I guess there. I don't know how you managed to book a room out at Doomben at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning without it getting around that something might be going on, but that's probably a separate discussion. But particularly even from a coverage point of view, there's obviously an Ashes Test match going on in Brisbane this week. You're trying to get cut through and broader, I guess, industry cut through. People be talking about it. I'm not too sure about putting a plan out on 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning is exactly glowing of what you think its impact might be broader. But anyway, that's probably a PR announcement thing more than anything else. But it's an interesting one. I think there's probably obviously they wanted to get it out this year. There's a few surprises that they've sort of put it to this point, but we'll see what happens, Tim.
Well, I think for the Saturday morning, the previous one before they aborted it was going to be Saturday. I think there is.
I think it was a Monday, actually, Tim. From memory,
okay.
that was actually.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, but they announced it on a Saturday. But there is the Battle of the Bush and a couple of country races. There's a lot of country participants in town. I think that's part of their thinking as well. We've got some of those representatives, we can speak directly to them rather than them hearing it secondhand or having to come back down, especially if you're club sort of level country administrators and so forth. So I think that was part of their thinking, but it'll be an interesting Saturday morning before even the first race is run, that's for sure.
Yeah, and you, such as I had when as a young lad, had to travel to go to racetracks or whatever, and being there at 9 o'clock in the morning doesn't seem exactly convenient either. But I'll leave that one alone for now, Tim. Speaking of racetracks, and a race club that actually doesn't have a racetrack at the moment, Moonee Valley. Warwick Farm's written a very interesting story this morning. I had a chat with Adam Lennon, who's the chairman of Moonee Valley Racing Club. We often hear from the CEO, Michael Brow, but we chatted to Adam Lennon about what Moonee Valley is doing as a race club while they're effectively in recess from a racing point of view. They're still conducting race meetings, be they at Geelong, Cranbourne and Pakenham. But for those Friday night meetings or Friday meetings belong to them. So there's still obviously operational stuff going on there. But it's interesting to see sort of how they're planning and how they're using this opportunity to, I guess, set up Moonee Valley for the next 20 to 25 years. I guess it's fair to say, Tim, there's a bit of trepidation certainly from traditionalists about what Moonee Valley may look like after this may happen. But the message sort of coming out from Moonee Valley is that we're taking into account that we want to preserve that, I guess, intimate Moonee Valley feeling of being close to the action and create a race course that can be better than what was there before. Whether that eventuates not, we'll find out. But it is a very sort of topical and interesting thing to look at, isn't it?
Yeah, and I read Warwick's story just this morning myself, and interesting quote in there that suggestion was that there's that Moonee Valley's appeal, I guess, is that amphitheatre sort of vibe and look, and suggestion is that actually the crowd might be 25 metres closer to the action under the new plan. I think it's going to be a longer straight, but yeah, it'll be, I guess the board and Michael Brown that are very conscious of what made Moonee Valley special, and they're trying to obviously replicate that to a small degree, I guess, or maintain some of that feel. Whether they can achieve that with modern building, it'll be time will tell.
Yeah, and each racetrack, I mean, I think there will be a degree of, I guess, critical eyes cast over how that eventuates. And it's a relatively short time frame, 2 years to completely redo a racetrack and make sure it's right. It's not easy to make sure they bed that out right from a surface point of view. There's a whole bunch of other challenges sort of arriving from there. The other topic I wanted to sort of put on the table, Tim, from a racing perspective is this. It looks like, at this stage, the British racing has avoided what was called the racing tax, which was an extra duty which is going to be put on betting on racing from 15% to 21%. Now that's not happened, which was seen as a sort of a net positive for racing. But the challenge is there's been significant extra duty put upon, or extra taxes put upon other online gambling, especially sports betting, which goes to 25%, and I guess effectively online casino games, which are illegal in the UK, which gone to 40%. The bookmakers, or the big corporate bookmakers over there, big betting companies are fairly unhappy about this. They say it's going to affect their bottom line. And what is interesting is that one of the first things they said they'll have to look to cut will be promotion of racing and sponsorship of racing. So obviously we've seen in Australia that, through club sponsorships or various other forms, bookmakers have underwritten clubs in terms of their sponsorship and be able to help them, to use their real estate in order to promote the product, right? If that's not going to happen, then that's a dangerous thing. But I guess there's a couple of lessons to come out of that, and I wrote an article about it this week. The first lesson for me is that wagering and racing are so inextricably linked, and rightly or wrongly, anything that happens in the wagering industry will have a knock-on impact on the racing industry. Even if it's nothing to do with racing betting. There was an article published elsewhere this week that said, every money that, we've got to fight sports betting. Like, it's a ridiculously naive view to have a view to sit there and say, sports betting's the evil and we've got to stop people betting on sport. For me, this is my opinion, but I've studied this a lot. Sports betting is a necessary, really important aspect of the broader wagering ecosystem in Australia. So that's the first part. The second part is, and I pose this question, it's a little bit different in the UK than Australia in terms of regulation, but say the Australian federal government comes out tomorrow and says, we're going to impose another 15% duty on gambling tax in Australia because we believe with, whatever reason, whatever else. How would the Australian racing industry react to that? Now, we've seen it, the Australian racing industry is not united on a lot of things, Tim. There's a lot of aspects where there's some challenges. There is some united voice, but even when there's some of this gambling stuff was discussed a few years ago in the what became the You Win Some, You Lose More report, the inquiry that preceded that, racing wasn't publicly at those hearings. They put submission in, but AFL was there, NRL was there, other sports were there in order to preserve their thing. But racing is 100% or 95% dependent on wagering revenue, and it wasn't there. So I think if we looked at and say if there was an existential threat to racing in Australia from a political point of view or from a regulatory point of view, how would racing respond? I think it's a fair question to ask given the situation we find ourselves in. The following segment is brought to you by Inglis. The catalogue for the 2026 Inglis Classic Yearling Sale has been released with 798 lots set to go under the hammer at Riverside Stables in Sydney from February 8th to February 10th. Yearlings by 113 sires make up the book, including Leading Stallions, Extreme Choice, Stitzel, Uninvincible, Zoostar, Too Darn Hot, Wooten Bassett, Written Tycoon and Street Boss, as well as a deep roster of emerging names. 74 vendors will present yearlings, the vast majority eligible for stake-based incentive schemes like Bob's, Phobos Silver, Cutis, Racing Rewards SA or West Speed bonuses. The Classic Sales produced 24 Group 1 winners since 2018, including recent top-level performers Pride of Jenny, Seppel's Private Harry and Skybird. Hong Kong Star Voyage Bubble is another notable graduate. Go to english.com.au to check out the catalogue. On the breeding, I think actually I just realised we've already got into the breeding discussion. Yeah, well, I was already getting into wagering, but mentioned there for a notable result from one of the major investors in Australian breeding and bloodstock over the last 5 years in Trilogy. Jason and Mel Stenning put a lot of money in, and they got a Group 1 winner in the winter bottom with Libertad. You spoke to Jason early this week, and there was a sort of sense from him of, there's some momentum really sort of gathering with their investment, isn't there?
Yeah, Jason and Mel, and along with important part of their business, Sean and Kathy Dingwall, are now running Blue Gum Farm for Jason and Mel, an integral part of the whole bloodstock business that they've set up. They came in 2021 English 2-year-old sale, and everyone, well, I was there and went, who are these guys? And they're passionate about the industry. Yes, it's a business, and they've invested, I won't say how much, but a significant amount of money, and were part of the China Horse Club, Newgate, Colt Syndicate, so they've had Osmosis and Militarise, and they've bought a share. They've got shares in Jacquinot and a few other different stallions, but to get a Group 1 winner with Libertad in Perth under their own colours, the diagonal triangles, and Trilogy was significant for them, and it is as we all know, anyone that's owned horses, it's up and down, no matter how many you've got. Huge variance there, but they're committed to the cause, and it's just getting started with their brood mares, and breeding is where they're aiming, and racing horses is to, I guess, replenish those broodmare bands and hopefully stallions. So where Libertad ends up, does he go to stud? Does he go to Blue Gum Farmers? And in Victoria's question to be answered later on, but they're having a lot of fun with Libertad, and as Jason sort of quietly pointed out to me, he started big odds when he's won, and I think they've, as well, on top of sort of the $1 million prize money, they've cleaned up on the punt, so good on them. And like a lot of others, they're valuable contributors to the industry. It doesn't function without people like you need everyone. You need the 5% owners right through to the Jason and Mel Stennings pouring in a lot of money.
Yeah, and I think if you look back on it since the sort of pandemic, or since that period, they were probably number 2 in terms of new investment to the industry in Australia, wouldn't they? Probably behind, obviously, a fair few lengths behind Yulong, but Yulong would take a lot of the headlines. But I think they've invested a lot of money and a lot of different bloodstock, and quite handily in the way they've done it. They've built up something that will last many, many years, which is key as well. Speaking of Mr. Zhang and his global involvements, he was busy at Tatts, as were a few other Australian investors. Tim buying mares, and a lot of them, some of them, have come back down to Australia in order to bolster both our racing and breeding stocks moving forward.
Mr. Zhang on his UK banner Ace Stud was pretty active, but probably for me the most interesting one was Arrowfield, and John Freer was over there for Arrowfield, and they bought a half sister to Too Darn Hot. She's in foal to the Northern Hemisphere at the moment, and so she'll foal down. Then they bring her out, and their aim is to have her covered by the Autumn Sun next year. So, he's leading the Stallion Premiership at the moment, just with obviously Autumn Glow leading the way for him this season. But he is sort of a stallion on the up and really going well despite missing last year. There will be a bit of a momentum halt, I guess, but they're really backing. They did pay 1.3 million guineas, so it's a significant investment. They bought off Watership Down, who own Too Darn Hot with Darley and Godolphin. So it's quite interesting. Cambridge Stud was also over there. They bought a much cheaper mare in foal to Southern Hemisphere time to Starman, who's the leading first season stallion in Ireland and Britain. And I think he was second in France as well. So promising young stallion. I think they got him 35,000 guineas. So relatively cheap on the market, I guess. But yeah, there's still, Aussie investment, and there's Arcana to come. And then, so I'm sure there'll be activity over there as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think that would be close to probably, certainly I would think the biggest investment Arrowfield have made on a single mare since the Arcadia Queen, probably since they invested in it, they bought her. So it's a significant investment. You wonder whether perhaps, it'll be interesting to hear from John Frere once he gets back and have a chat, but whether they're going to make a bit of a move at the mare sales next year in Australia in order to sort of basically, with Snitzel now gone, sadly, Reduced Choice obviously long gone as well, is the efforts to support the Autumn Sun and to make sure that he becomes a champion stallion. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens, because Arrowfield probably been a little bit quiet last couple of years in terms of mare acquisitions or whatever else. Little wonder, because you've got to compete in that sort of market where there's a lot of money going around, particularly at the Yulong end. But no, it's interesting times with that as well. Tim also wanted to sort of there's a statement put out by Thoroughbred Breeders Australia, a couple of quotes there in an article there from both Basil Nolan, who's the TBO chairman, but also the Ozhorse chairman, Anthony Thompson, about the desire to see an end to this patent discussion. Tim, we're sort of, all dizzied out on patent discussion, but it's clearly a point of frustration. It probably harks back to that discussion I was having before about needing to solve national issues. There's a lot more to play out with this story, I think, and the Asian Racing Federation or the Asian Patent Committee are getting more and more frustrated with Australia's lack of response on this one. It's got to be fixed. It's got to be sorted. The finger pointing. There's been a lot of finger pointing. It's not relevant. It needs to be sorted out, because Australia needs to have a creditable black type system, doesn't it?
There's another Asian Patent Committee meeting next Friday the 12th. So I'm sure that issue will be on there. I wrote in newsletter on Tuesday. To me, the crux is the issue, and as we know, Racing New South Wales Chair Sarah Ann Cook put out a statement on last Friday on their website. So finger pointing, and don't blame Racing New South Wales, here are the facts, so they say. Point is, I think it's who makes these decisions, who will end up making the decisions with what races need to be demoted and which are promoted, and a working pattern which basically it hasn't worked for probably about 9 years or hasn't been functioning. It's who decides that, and how. There's those black type guidelines that were proposed and then sort of backed away from. So I guess the concern from some observers is that just using hard and fast ratings will provide more power to the bigger PRAs, with more prize money. That sort of, if an independent, I guess, is a push for an independent patent committee away from the PRA's power. They can make submissions. Whether that comes off, who knows, and whether the Asian Patent Committee can even, they need to have the submissions from Racing Australia. A lot. It's just so complicated. It's no one person's fault, or organisation, I should say. There's just so many moving parts, and probably a function of Racing Australia's inability to achieve anything because of the way it's made up of the differing PRAs.
It points to the broader national dysfunction of Australian racing, the way it's structured from an administrative point of view. Like I said, it's not an organisational capability. It's the capability the organisations being given, not the capability the organisations have. And I guess that's the point. And it becomes a political football. And we've seen that. Like there's the stuff that came out last week. We've seen that. We acknowledge what Racing New South Wales have put out last week. A lot of the things that they put out, or most of the things they put out there, are indisputable by fact. But I think there's a bit more going on there as well. And I think it's an issue we could talk a lot about and find ourselves involved in a fight which doesn't actually achieve an end. I think most people are keen to see an end. I think the breeders are probably the ones who are most nervous about this. There is an argument to say that, mum and dad punters don't really give a toss about whether it's a Group 3, a Group 2 or a Group 1, but it is an important engagement tool for people to understand what makes a race an important race. And, it hasn't been functioning as it should be in the last 7 or 8 years in terms of downgrading races and all those types of things. And that's an indisputable fact. it needs to be better and needs to be sorted out. There's also things around competition law and whatever else, but it feels like, Tim, we're going around in circles on this, and it may require or may end up being an international slap in the face that brings people back to the table to sort this out.
Well,
but we'll see what happens. On to wagering now. Article today about the Tote, the national Tote, the ambition of Gillon McLachlan, the CEO of Tabcorp. He sort of wants to achieve this uniting of the three pools by end of next year, end of this financial year, so June 2026. I'm interested to see if he can get there, that for a start. But why are they doing this? I've written an article on the Straight. You have a look at it, basically talking about if you look at the pattern of the decline of the Tote, that decline is slowing down. So Victoria is the only state that provides detailed parimetrical information, Tim, so in terms of data. So it's the only one you can sort of rely upon in terms of that. It has been 16% of the market, the turnover market, for the past 3 years. Now, I think from 2019, it was like 27%. So it's slumped enormously over COVID, which I understand because you've got retailers associated with that. Then sort of 18%, and then now it's sort of on that 16% line. It shows that perhaps, Gill's faith in the Tote is not ill-founded. And also, the reality is 16% of the market is still 16% of the market, and Tab own 100% of that with the exception of WA. So if Tab can get upside in that, it makes sense for them to actually, build that market back up or try to do it. At least stop the decline of the Tote and see the value of it. And it fits into their retail first strategy. There's a vibe around Tab at the moment about how they're trying to do things. Whether that's sustainable or not, we'll see. But I think going back to some of the stuff we talked about already in the podcast, Tim, about uniting national. The word united and national are not two things you associated with Australia at the moment. If Gill can achieve this, and don't forget, this is a guy that used to run the AFL, where state by state and club by club politics was a significant part of his job managing those stakeholders. If he's able to pull together on this and get everybody to agree that it's worthwhile doing, well, it is a symbolic value to them, and it does create a halo around Tab and points back to that, Tab being the uniter or whatever else. Now, whether you agree with that or not, it's a good selling point for them, and it'd be a huge achievement he was able to be able to do it. Tim, the final thing I want to talk about is same race and same game multis. There's an article from Waterhouse VC on the Straight this week, which is taken from their November edition. I need to subscribe to the Waterhouse VC newsletter. It's a really interesting insight into the global wagering trends if you want to know about those things. The growth of same race and same game multis. How do you say, Tim? I mean, there's a generational thing. Think about, let's probably separate same race and same game, because I think same game multis have an application to a generation, probably, to be honest, beneath us. They could really engage with that from a point of view, and they've been an enormous opportunity for wagering companies to really leverage a high margin product.
Yeah, and they are high margin. Certainly the same game multis, to my knowledge, are very high margin, highly profitable, fair bit of variance there. If you talk to some of the corporates over, especially the football finals, they had some big losses there, but it does seem to engage a lot of punters. And then on the race punting, I guess you could, if you're smart about it, you should be doing it yourself and shopping around for prices and for your own same race multis, I guess. But most people only have money in one account or two accounts, so they just makes it easier for that. And I guess corporates are very good at finding out what punters want or how they'll bet, and that same race multi seems to be working. So, I can't see it going anywhere anytime soon. It'll be, important for the younger punters particularly.
Yeah, and it probably goes back to the discussion we had about the Tote before. The exotics are a key appeal of the Tote market, but if same race multis start to sort of take a section of that market, it does change the game a little bit. Talk about your own behaviour, I suppose, and there's been times where probably 5 years ago I might have taken a few horses in a trifecta, where I'll sit there now, I'll throw them in the same race multi. Now, I may be being an idiot and costing myself margin. That wouldn't be the first time someone has accused me of that, but there was an appeal to that. Going, there's an appeal to that. And I think it's a market ability to go, okay, well, you get certainty over the dividend. That's the first thing. And the other thing is that, you get, I guess, some control of going, hey, I want two of my horses to finish in the top 5 or whatever else. So, It's an interesting one. I think it's obviously clearly something that the bookies are keen to push and see the value of it. It probably feeds back into the Tote discussion, as I said. But do you ever take same race or same game multis, Tim?
No.
Yeah, there you go.
Do you think
a 25-year-old Tim would do that?
Well, I think it's a good way of we talk about the sports punters, and you brought it up earlier. It's a good way of hopefully bringing them across to punting on racing. That, I'm familiar with my same game multi. I'll have the same race multi. And it's just a stepping stone, and then hopefully they become more engaged about whether they use it, Sky Tipster or whatever, or just happen to be watching Brad Davison on Sky One at the moment, or start hopefully engaging with their own form, and that engagement that which is exciting about racing is doing the form yourself and trying to work it out and find a winner.
Yeah. Steve McMahon alluded to before, it's not necessarily about making someone a number 10 engagement on the scale. Sometimes it's about moving someone from a 3 to a 4 and getting them more excited because they can understand a product, or they go, there's a sports product which I can relate across. Thanks for joining us on Straight Talk, brought to you by Darley and Inglis, our fabulous sponsors. Don't forget to give us a rating wherever you're listening to us, and be sure to subscribe. And don't forget to check out the Straight membership, $199 per year, $19 per month, well worth your price of entry to access all our articles across the site, including our exclusive insights, news and analysis. Send us an email at editor@straight.com.au if you've got anything you wanted us to chat about in the podcast, and we'll catch you again next week.